I always felt like I was doing something wrong. If I had a bad day, I was like, "Oh my God, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I having such a bad day? Why am I in such a bad mood? I've been working on myself, right?" And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. If your vibes are lower on a certain day, that you're doing something wrong, and that's just not the case. Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. So today I felt very called for some reason to record outside, and obviously I'm still getting the settings figured out and all that. It's a pretty warm day, but I really wanted to be outdoors and just chat with you guys. So please excuse any noise, but welcome to the new era of my channel. You know, I really felt called today to talk about my biggest pet peeve in self-development. This is one of the things I really dislike about self-development culture, and it's that we're always taught to always be improving, right? And I made some notes because there's a lot that I want to get into here. I should have brought my glasses. That's okay. um I think that self-development culture can be really unhealthy. I don't like to use the word toxic, but self-development culture really leads us to sort of repress certain parts of ourselves, right? Our shadow aspects, so to speak, our bad parts of ourselves, whether that's like our anxiety, right? Essentially, what I'm saying is that similarly to traditional psychology, with self-development culture, it's very much about getting rid of the bad, right? Getting rid of the bad parts of yourself, whatever that means, right? We're taught to repress the bad and focus on the good. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with focusing on the positive, right? I think there's something to be said about the culture that it creates when we only want to focus on improving constantly. There's this aspect of self-development which I really struggled with when I first started getting into self-development and all that, which is that I always felt like I was doing something wrong. If I had a bad day, I was like, "Oh my God, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I having such a bad day? Why am I in such a bad mood? I've been working on myself," right? And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. It's like you feel like if your vibes are lower on a certain day, that you're doing something wrong. And that's just not the case. You know, I think the truth is that we have to look at it from a frame of duality, sort of like, you can't have happiness without sadness. You wouldn't know what it feels like to experience joy if you didn't experience the bad days as well. So I want to posit a new way of looking at self-development. And I really think that my mission here is to redefine self-development in a way that's not so much about fixing. And I've said this a lot recently in my content. If you're not already following me on Instagram, TikTok, and all the other channels, I really encourage you to do that because I post here on YouTube twice a week. Ooh, it's getting warm. I post here on YouTube twice a week, but I also post throughout the week on my other channels. And there's a lot to be said about the definition that we currently have of self-development. My mission is to redefine that. And the way I look at self-development is, first of all, I'm going to pull up the definition of development, right? It means growth, it means evolution. And when you look at the term self-development, we're talking about a development, an evolution, growth of the self. What does that mean, right? The way I look at it is, let me just change my position here and grab a little water. I'm so glad I brought my little cover because, oh man, okay. This is why I bring my notes, because I get distracted, right? So the way I look at it and the way I like to simplify it as much as possible is think of it as becoming more of yourself, becoming more you, right? It's not about fixing something, it's about developing it. Otherwise, it would be called self-correction, right? I love to say that. I love to remind myself of that it's not really about correcting anything. It's not about fixing anything or repressing anything, but rather it's about just developing the self and becoming more of your true self. Now, let's talk about the true self, the most authentic self, right? What does that mean? I think about it this way. The true self is the version of you that encompasses all of you, your whole self, right? This is why I always talk about how important self-discovery and self-reflection are, right? Getting to know yourself, because if you don't know yourself well enough, how are you supposed to know who your authentic self is, right? How do you know who your true self is when you don't know yourself? The way that I do that, the way that I like to learn about myself is I really like to focus on my desires. right? Because when we're getting to know ourselves, something I see very often. So my phone overheated, so we're back inside, we're back in my office, but you know, that was actually really nice. I think one thing I learned is that we don't record midday. So maybe we'll try later in the afternoon next time. But all right, so we're talking a little bit about that self-discovery, right? And kind of like why self-discovery and reflection are so important. I think I left off saying that what I like to focus on when I'm doing self-discovery is my desires. Because a lot of the times when we're trying to figure out what we want in life, right, who we want to be, more importantly, we think about like what we don't want. And I think that's very human nature of us. Like, it's just very human to think about the things that we don't desire, to kind of focus on the things we don't want, right? What's going wrong. Oftentimes when I sit down with myself and I'm getting to know a new version of myself, right? Whenever I kind of like step into a new timeline, a new version of me, I often think about like, okay, so what do I want out of this new reality, right? What do I want to work on? What do I want to improve on? What do I want to really focus on this cycle? And oftentimes what comes up is like, I want to be less something, right? So for example, I'll give you an example from my past, right? So a few years ago, some of you know that I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression. I was on antidepressants and I didn't want that. And so whenever I would sit down and ask myself, like, what do I want? I would be like, I want to be less depressed. I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be anxious, right? But that doesn't tell us what we want, right? We're still focusing in a sense on the anxiety, on the depression. So what do you want? I always say that without a clear vision, you have nothing. You have no direction. So start with your desires because they really do bring you back to yourself. So going back to that example that I just shared, it's like, okay, so what do I want? I want more joy. I want more peace. I want to feel more at home in myself. I want to feel more relaxed, right? It's not thinking about less stress, for example, right? Because then you're still focusing on the stress itself. You think, I want more inner peace, right? And that's just an example of how you can focus on your desires in order to kind of craft your vision. And the way I like to think about my desires is as versions of myself that are waiting for their turn in the spotlight. So I always say, you guys, every version of yourself is within you. Every desire you have is a version of yourself that is waiting to come out. So for example, if you want to be like rich and abundant, that is a version of you that exists. Otherwise you wouldn't have the desire, right? Your job is to tap into that version of yourself by getting clear on your vision and deciding like, what do I want exactly? What is my vision? You know, I'll tell you a little story. When I was younger, like when I was really young and I was a little kid, I always had like this entrepreneurial spirit. I had this obsession with stationery. Like I loved pens, papers, notebooks, planners, even if I had nothing to plan, right? And I used to play CEO. Like that was one of my favorite games. It's just like pretending to be in my office and being a CEO of something. At the time, the only understanding I had of being a CEO was like working for a big company, right? So I would imagine myself working for whatever, I don't know what was big at the time, like Microsoft or something. I was like the CEO of Microsoft and I would play my little office game. You know, that version of me, that entrepreneur was always within me. That is what brought me joy. And so once I started to kind of think back and really reflect on who I am I at my core, who is my most authentic self, I remembered like, these are the things that brought me joy, right? Like when I was young, when I was like probably 12 or 13, I wanted to be a YouTuber. That brought me a lot of joy, like editing content, creating content. When I was even younger than that, I wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? Or a CEO or whatever. And here I am because I tapped into those versions of myself. I tapped into my innermost desires, meaning like, what brings me the most joy? What do I want out of life? In this case, the answer was like stationery. Like I love papers and pens and highlighters and stuff like that. And it's not really about the material things, right? Though they are fun. And this is a material 3D world that we live in. But it's really not about those things. It's about what they represent. They represent the office space, right? They represent creativity and imagination coming to life, right? Writing things down on paper, bringing things out into the 3D. And then with YouTube, it's kind of the same thing. I wanted to be a YouTuber because I wanted to express myself vocally, verbally. I wanted to express myself through editing, right? I wanted to share my knowledge with people. At the time, I didn't have too much. I was a kid, right? But I wanted to share something. I wanted to put my voice out there. And so I started tapping into those parts of myself, right? And tapping into my innermost desires. And I've never been more fulfilled. You know what I mean? Like here I am running my own business. Here I am having a YouTube channel, chatting with you guys. So, you know, this kind of brings me back to what I was saying at the beginning, which is we are taught self-development in a way where it's about like fixing something about yourself or becoming, you know, having the most perfect morning routine and becoming like that girl, right? But that girl is not the goal. The goal is to become more of who you are, not of who society tells you you should be, not of who your parents tell you you should be, or your friends, or whoever you're looking for approval from. It's what brings you joy. What do you want? What are your desires, right? And then tapping into that version of you, tapping into those versions of you that are within you, waiting to come out, waiting for their turn in the spotlight, and really just becoming more of you. Like I said, right? Going back to that definition of self-development, it's like developing the self. And I don't like to use the words in the definition, so it's like growth of you. Let's just simplify it that way. It's the evolution of you and becoming more of who you are. And so I really wanted to make this video because I've been touching on all these points throughout my recent videos, but I think this is really the one where we're sitting down and redefining self-development and kind of creating this new paradigm for ourselves where we all become more of ourselves, because I think that is the goal. I think the world would be a much better place if we all just understood ourselves better and accepted ourselves and loved ourselves for who we are rather than who we think we should be. So I want to encourage you this week to really think about that. Think about like, what version of yourself do you want to step into right now? Who do you want to focus on being right now? Do you want to focus on being that creative self? Do you want to bring out your entrepreneurial self? Do you want to bring out, like, I don't know, your most abundant self? Like, think about the vision, think about who you want to live as, and step into that version of yourself. You know, do the little things that that person would do or that version of you would do, right? And it doesn't have to be anything huge. You know, people think that you have to like uproot your entire life, and that's just not the case. I mean, you can, but it's about taking the little steps. So for example, what would the most abundant version of you today, right? Maybe she would like just rest and give herself a rest day, and maybe you can't do that because you have responsibilities and a job and all that, but do just a little bit of that. Embody her for 5 minutes in the morning, take a little bath, do a little meditation, sleep in for 5 minutes, right? Like, tap into that version of yourself as much as you can. And little by little, those tiny little changes, they start accumulating and they start building up into this version of yourself so you can fully embody her, so you can fully let her out, right? Because at the end of the day, we seek our higher selves out there somewhere, or this ideal version of ourselves, and we're trying to reach her, we're trying to chase her. But the reality is there's nothing to chase because she's inside you. She's just waiting for her turn in the spotlight. She's waiting for you to let her out. She's waiting for you to embody her. So embody her, right? That is your homework for this week. That is what I encourage you to do this week. And let me know in the comments, like, even today, what little thing are you doing today to embody the version of you that you want to become? And if you need support with any of this, I have a couple of free resources for you. The first one is called Collapse the Timeline. This is where you're really going to figure out that vision, right? So if you're not sure who that version of you is, if you're not sure who you want to be, this workbook is going to guide you and help you figure out exactly what the vision is. And then we also have the embodiment protocol, which is another free PDF where you're going to go in and actually choose some traits of your ideal self and learn how to embody them step by step. So I'm going to leave both of those in the description for you. Again, they're both free. You can go ahead and download them and play around with them. And they're just a lot of fun on top of it. Like, I do them pretty often because there's always another version of you waiting to come out. Like, we are so, oh, what's the word? Is it intricate? Is it like multidimensional? Like, we are just, there's so much of us to be explored and to learn about. So, you know, these are tools that you can use on an ongoing basis as well. I use them all the time and they're so much fun. And really just do whatever it takes to get to know yourself, to understand yourself better, and to embody those parts of you that are waiting to be embodied. And I think that's all I got for today. So I will see you on Wednesday. And if you're not already a part of the community, please consider subscribing because there's a lot more where this came from. All right, I'll see you next time.